Greetings, fellow avatars and my AI enemies. Welcome to the discussion. Whether you're part of the console bros, whether you're part of the PC master race, welcome to the discussion of Ready Player 2. But Zach, what if I'm a mobile gamer?
Get the hell out of here, you filthy casual.
However, before we do start reviewing the book, I do have one very important announcement to make. I have some great news. I have hired a new developmental editor to work with me on my writing, and she's actually here in studio today, so we're going to introduce her. Is everyone excited? You should be. This is Kira. This is Kira. And before anyone says anything, no, not Kira like the Kira in this book, Kira like the Kira in my book. Spelled different and everything, I swear. So, review of Ready Player 2. First of all, it was great. I really enjoyed it. However, I am reviewing this book from a different perspective than most people, I'm sure, because I'm that guy who got into this story by watching the movie, and I haven't read the first book yet. However, I do plan on going back and reading it now that I've read the second, because the second was just really good in my opinion. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the movie. So I definitely plan on going back and filling myself in on the story and getting the story firsthand, because I know the movie was pretty different. But I know I got the gist. I read an article about the differences between the movie and the book to prep myself for reading the second, and between my research and taking some context clues, I think I pretty much got the gist of the things that I was missing. So if I say anything weird, it's because I didn't read the first book. Alright boys, let's crack open a cold one, get into it. So, first off, the characters. Oh man, Wade is a little bit of a creep, isn't he? I can understand where he's coming from a lot of the time though, and I understand what it's like to be that lonely and that desperate for human interaction, and so I understand a lot of the things he did early on in this book. What, you want to chip too, Kira? So the fact that we see him doing the kinds of things we see him doing early in the book really establishes him as a flawed protagonist, which is always good, because in my opinion a flawed protagonist is worlds better than these protagonists that you see that almost have no flaws, that are, quickly approaching Mary Sue territory. No one likes that protagonist. And so Wade has some very serious character defects, but he manages to skirt around being an outright bad person. That's important to liking your protagonist. So, very well done, Mr. Klein. Moving on to the rest of the high five. H was never my favorite character from the first movie. However, I flat out do not like her in this book. Mostly as a matter of personality. She's not a bad character. I would just hate her if I knew her in real life. I don't like the general pushiness and kind of the pushiness. I'm not a fan. So H is a well-written character. I personally don't like her. Moving on. I love Artemis. I absolutely love Artemis. You like Artemis too? Yeah, you would. Artemis is a great example of a strong female protagonist in my opinion, because she's not strong by being good at fighting. She's not strong because she's one of the boys. She's strong because she's fierce and independent and intelligent and has a very good moral compass. So Artemis / Samantha is a really good character, and I think that in some places she steals the show in this book, so that's really cool. Being that Shoto is kind of the member of the High Five that gets the least attention, it's kind of hard to give any kind of a solid opinion on him, at least for me. I don't really have many strong opinions about Shoto other than I like him, and I feel like he's a pretty decent guy, but I feel like he kind of gets swept up in the torrent, just kind of goes along with what the group is doing. And that doesn't necessarily make him bad, but it does make him passive. And so Shoto is definitely not a bad character, just a passive character. But, you know, every book has those. So moving on to the settings, I really enjoyed Klein's settings, and he writes them very well. He describes them very well. I feel like I'm there. He does a really good job of describing them in not so many words. He does not spend a lot of time describing where you're at, in my opinion, especially compared to some other authors. But you just feel like you're there. I mean, his talent for saying so much in not so many words, submerging you in the environment, he's good at it. He's definitely good at it. It's easy to see why the first novel was so popular. Now, the story, I'm going to speak pretty loosely here. The book has been out for a while. I'm a slow reader, and I had other things come up one after the other preventing me from getting to it. So everyone's read it by now, so I'm not going to worry about spoilers. So it turns out Halliday left us one more surprise after his death. The Oni headset, which is capable of making an exact copy of your mind and interfacing you directly with your avatar in the Oasis, putting your body in a coma-like state. It's a revolutionary technology, and it is very frightening, some of the implications it has. And of course, those get talked about a little bit. I won't say of course, because some authors wouldn't, but Klein did. And some of the consequences of this technology are downright terrifying, and a whole economy emerges around dealing with these consequences. Of course, Samantha, being the level-headed and intelligent person she is, she sees the immediate, serious drawbacks to this technology and is the lone naysayer in her group of friends. This obviously causes some tension with Wade, who is a techno junkie by anyone's measure. And so there is a chasm between the high five at the start of the story where we have to overcome the machinations and diabolical plot of a rogue AI Halliday, and the whole thing is very well paced, very fun, and of course dripping with nostalgia in typical Ready Player fashion. And I really enjoyed the story. Like I said, I think the pacing is really good, and I think the structure is really good. And I don't know if Ernest Cline just knows all this 80s and 90s and whatnot trivia, or if he researches it, but it's crazy how much garbage about pop culture in that particular time frame is just crammed in here, and yet it doesn't feel like it's crammed in here. It feels natural. It's amazing. And the webs that this guy weaves to create these clues and these challenges, Ernest Cline's mind amazes me. I don't know if he has someone help him with this. I don't know if he comes up with this shit on his own, but it's amazing. And it's one of the things about humans that never ceases to amaze me, these puzzles and mind games that we manage to create. It's very fun. One thing that got a little bit irritating for me is that he likes to cite all these things, these band names, these names of movies and things, and he doesn't always respect the Oxford comma. And so there were a few places where he would put a band name, and I had no idea where the band name ended and the prose continued, because it was one of those band names that sounded like part of a sentence. And so I was like, wait, and so I had to Google it a few times to find out where the band name ended. If you were a pop culture junkie, you wouldn't have that issue, obviously, but I did. And so, Mr. Cline, please respect the Oxford comma and separate things that are part of a list with a comma. Next, I just have some notes that I want to talk about. They're snippets from the book or general themes from the book that I want to talk about, and some of them are pretty interesting. Some of them are just, fun little things. So on page 90, Ernest wrote this little bit about how Wade can spy on all of the Oasis users with his super user abilities that he gets from the robes of Anorak. And I just thought that was really good social commentary. He talks about how much of people's lives GSS actually has access to. And obviously that's highly relevant social commentary these days, with your phone literally knowing where you are at all times, regardless of whether or not you turn off GPS location, with your phone listening to what you're saying so that it can target ads at you, all kinds of crazy shit that our smartphones do. And so that little bit of social commentary was highly relevant, and it was thrown in so seamlessly that someone who wasn't very aware of those kinds of things wouldn't even notice it twice, which is, in my opinion, the best way to throw social commentary into a narrative, because then it sticks in the back of your brain and it's a little thought seed, and that's the best way to include stuff like that in a story, so you're not bludgeoning your reader over the head with it. Right after that passage, he goes on to talk about the social effects that the Oni headset is having on society and people. He talks about how, because now you can relive other people's experiences and see things from other people's perspective, how things like homosexuality and pretty much all the things on the LGBTQ whatever side of the aisle are now much more accepted and tolerated and understood. And I think that was pretty insightful on his part. I absolutely agree with his assessment that technology like the Oni headset would have that social effect. You know, it's very hard to see things from someone else's perspective, experience it from their perspective, and not have more sympathy and compassion for them. So if technology ever exists that lets us do the things the Oni headset lets us do, I think that is one of the things that will happen. And I think for the most part it would be a good thing, you know. More tolerance of people who are different from you is almost always a good thing. Moving away from the social commentary stuff, something that I absolutely love and that Ernest Cline is really good at is in-story slang. Ernest has an entire lexicon of Oasis-related slang that he's created, and he doesn't beat you over the head with it, but it does get, you know, sprinkled into the story, and for the most part it flows in really well, and that's really cool. I love it when writers are able to create their own story related words and use them appropriately, and it creates this sense of immersion, and he does that really well, so I like that about his writing. Something about the story that really struck me was that once the plot gets going and we have the stakes established, there's 500 million lives on the line. And Wade doesn't call in all the help he can immediately because he wants to figure it out on his own. If that isn't the most egregious moment of sin of pride I've ever read, oh my god. 500 million lives on the line. Doesn't want to ask a girl for help. Sir, get over yourself. But we did already establish that Wade was a flawed protagonist, so no real surprise there. Going back to something I said previous in this review/discussion, I don't like H. And one of the things that really cemented it for me was she doesn't like Don't You Forget About Me by Simple Minds. And I'm sorry, if you don't like that song, there's something deeply wrong with you. It's a masterpiece. With that being said, H did have a funny moment in the book that I got a kick out of, and I actually stopped and laughed for a couple of moments. It was really, really fun. When Shoto blasphemes against the purple one, and then later on in the car when he's, you know, skirting that line, kind of dancing around it more, and H kind of just looks up to the sky, and she's like, really? that one doesn't merit a lightning bolt. Okay. That was funny. That was pretty funny. And now I want to move to the final part of this video, which is a much more serious discussion about the two, what I think are the two major themes and discussion points that are really hard-hitting subject matter in this book. And both of them have to do with ethics and morality and what makes someone good or bad, and you know, what the nature of humanity is. And the first one I want to hit is that in this book we find out some of the more messed up things Halliday did during his lifetime, and he's almost portrayed as being a little bit monstrous, and I don't agree with that assessment based on what he did. It's true that we don't know all the bad things he did, because there were some things about his life that he wanted to keep so secret he deleted the memories of them out of his own Oni copy because he just didn't want them to continue to exist. And whether those were things that happened to him or things that he did, we have no way of knowing. But we do know that there was some stuff in his mind he just didn't want to continue to exist. One of the things we do know he did, and one of the things that is chiefly used to portray him as being one of these, you know, morally gray, leaning towards black characters, is the copying of Kira's consciousness without her permission. And to me, this goes back to a debate I often have with people about, if a crime is victimless, is it really a crime? And you might say, well, hold on, don't even go there, because Kira was obviously a victim. But was she? She didn't even know while she was still alive that a copy had been made of her. It never negatively affected her. Halliday didn't use the copy to blackmail her. He didn't use it to worm his way into her life by gaining a bunch of insight into her. He literally made a copy of her to talk to. I'm sorry, I can't begrudge someone and be mad at someone for wanting someone to talk to. Loneliness is very much a drug, and it destroys you. When you get lonely enough, you start doing and thinking all kinds of things that the real you would not think and do. The transformative power of loneliness to warp you into something much darker and more hideous and sinister than the real you is frightening. And so I really can't fault Halliday for what he did, because loneliness has driven people to much greater evils than making an AI copy of someone they're obsessed with and talking to that AI copy in a virtual environment. Now, is it true that this was a gross invasion of her privacy? Yes. Is it true that he had no right to do it? Yes. It's definitely morally gray, leaning towards morally wrong. And I would not, just say, oh, don't, if he told me that, if he confessed that to me, I wouldn't be like, oh, dude, don't worry about it. You didn't do anything wrong. And I certainly would not be okay with someone doing that to me. My point here is that he could have done a lot worse. And these are the actions of someone who is in profound pain, in profound suffering. That person deserves compassion and understanding, not to be ridiculed and begrudged for wanting the suffering to end. He went about things wrong, there's no question, but he was not a monster. I don't even think he was a bad person. And in fact, when you look at some of his dialogue and some of his eccentricities and behavior that we see in this book and in the first movie, which I assume is somewhat modeled off the first book, then I think it's also safe to say that Halliday might be on the spectrum. Ernest Cline might not have intended that, but Halliday's character seems like he could very easily be on the autism spectrum. And so he might have problems interacting with people. He might have problems properly engaging with people and forming connections. And so loneliness is very likely in that scenario where you're a high functioning individual with autism. And so I really can't begrudge Halliday for what he did. And I can't even say for sure that if I wasn't in a very similar circumstance that I wouldn't do something similar. Whew, that got a little bit heavy. And then the other serious moral and ethical debate that comes up in this book because of the Oni is, what is it to be human? What does it mean to be human? What is a human? Ernest Cline postulates through his protagonist, Wade, or at least the AI copy of Wade, that human minds are separate from the body, that who we are is not intrinsically linked to our physical selves, and I disagree with that. I believe that we are more than our physical selves, to be sure. I believe that we do have a soul, and the mind is not inexorably attached to the body. But while we are alive, our mind is intricately and intimately attached to the body. We think the way we do, and we feel the way we do because of input from our body. Hormone production, stimulus, nerve signals, all these very complex things. Even your microbiome in your gut has an impact on your mind because of your mood and the way you intake nutrients and things like that. It's a very complex machine, our bodies, and it has a profound effect on our mind. And so I would disagree with the assessment that an Oni copy of any person would be a perfect copy of that person. Because once you remove all the stuff in here from the body, the personality and psychological drift is going to happen immediately, and it's going to be drastic. It's not going to be, a little bit of drift over time. It's going to be an immediate separation of thought processes and the way you think and feel about things. And to make that not happen, you would have to put the simulated mind in a simulated body where it was affected by all the same hormones, all the same feelings, pain, need for sleep, need to have bowel movements, everything. Our mind is affected by all that stuff. And obviously you wouldn't bother simulating that stuff because it's a waste of computing power, and part of the advantages of being AI copy of yourself is that you don't have to worry about the functions of your human body. So I respectfully disagree with the AI Wade and arguably the mortal Wade's assessment that Oni copies are perfect copies. I don't even think they're human. And while I certainly would not treat them badly, because they would be able to experience suffering in some form, in some capacity, I also would not treat them as human. And I don't think that anyone else should think of them as human, because to be human is to be alive. And computer programs, no matter how good they get at simulating life, are not truly alive, in my opinion. And so, guys, that is about all I have to say about this book. It was great. I really deeply enjoyed it. I recommend you check it out, especially if you checked out the first one. I imagine you'll like the sequel. If you've never heard of this series before, or if you've thought about getting into it, I would recommend picking up both book 1 and 2 and giving it a read. I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun, and there were some profound thinking moments, as the end of this video suggested. So, definitely a solid read. I would give it a 4 out of 5, 8, 9 out of 10. I really, truly enjoyed it. Man, I gotta start giving some shitty reviews on this channel, or else people are gonna think I'm like super easy impressed by everything. Alright, guys, that's about all I have to say. Be well. I'll catch you next time.